Hey, good evening. It's Sabine here. It's October 16th, and I've just published two articles, one on preparation and the one you see before you, birthed in his likeness. And I'm going to do it a little bit differently than I usually do. So this is an announcement video for both articles, and you have the opportunity to read them or scan them yourself. And tomorrow morning, my time, I'm actually going to read this one out. The other is more practical, so that is self-explanatory. But this article may require some comment on my part, especially the calculations. And I also know that some of you have difficulty reading or watching. So yes, I will make a video version of this tomorrow morning. The topic of this article is both beautiful and amazing, but also very serious and potentially daunting. We have looked at the scenario of the Lord coming amidst judgment falling, and I believe I see a marker on the calendar where both these events are anchored in. I'm not saying this is a definite, this is going to happen, let alone that I'm saying, thus saith the Lord. What I am saying is that based on my research, I see a pattern in not just the Feast of Tabernacles, but other scriptures as well, that we're about to enter in, be activated by the Lord to do a final witness. And that could very well start this week. Birthed in his likeness. This is a portion from Psalm 27, and that is the psalm which is read out loud to the people from Elul 1 till the end of Tabernacles. And I believe if you decide to read it, it's going to both give you a lot of comfort and inner peace, but also there's a lot of recognition with regard to what is going on. So I'm going to leave you to read that in the article. This article actually builds on a previous article. I've linked a couple of times in the past two articles and videos, but if you haven't seen them yet and you're not familiar with the Feast of Tabernacles and the picture of the Lord not just facing opposition and extending grace for the final time, but also the foreshadowing of the judgment of those in idolatry, I recommend for you to either read the article or watch the videos which are incorporated into that article. So as we look at the tabernacle calendar for the coming week, I'm actually looking at the time frame in between October 17th until the end of Simchat Torah. The October 17th marker to look for is the third quarter moon phase, because that, I believe, marks the end of the complete Pentecost count of all the harvest, grain, wine, and oil that could be brought to the temple until the Feast of Tabernacles. And on Torah calendar, you can see that they calculate the Sabbath on a weekly basis, but I've explained in a couple of articles previously that there is also a way of calendar keeping by the lunar Sabbaths. It sounds complicated, but in practice it's actually very easy. We spoke about the second Passover total lunar eclipse as the extended time frame the Lord has given us, because that pertains to people being spiritually unclean or unfamiliar with the proper proceedings, and the Lord made the provision for people who were afar off, and therefore not able to make it until for the first Passover. And that includes himself, right? He is also afar off. So from that marker in time, the total lunar eclipse in the Libra altar of redemption, May 16th, if we then count forward 7 lunar Sabbaths times 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We land on the third quarter moon of October, and that, by the lunar Sabbath count, is what they did in the Second Temple. And the early Christians, they kept the calendar by the lunar Sabbath count, not the weekly Sabbath count. That leads to October 17th. And it is explained in more detail in the article, and there's underlying information as well, why that is what I believe to be the marker of Pentecost fully come. And we can actually see how all the descriptions in the book of Acts match that of Jesus in the book of John, chapter 7 to 10. It runs parallel with what Jesus did on the temple grounds, with what would happen in Acts 2, and that is a foreshadowing what will also happen in the end times. So the next week, the overlap of all these feasts of dedication, of ingathering, and even Pentecost fully come. That is described over here with some underlying information, also what it looks forward to prophetically, the parallels with Joel 2, Acts 2, and the book of Isaiah. Jesus also hinting to and also referring to the coming outpouring of the Spirit, because by that time he was, of course, still with them in the flesh, and it was after his departure that the Spirit would come. The heavens declaring a birth. We're going to see a birth in Virgo tomorrow and the day afterward of first the sun. The sun is already transitioning out of the upper body of Virgo. It is crowning as we speak. So in continuation of the Revelation 12 sign and the repetition by the global elite of that same time frame, that is what they reenacted with the quote-unquote demise of the queen that paralleled the birth of the first moon of Jupiter, Europa. Charles' announcement was marked on the day that the king planet was birthed. And now what we see above us in the heavens is that the sun is being birthed out of Virgo tomorrow, followed right afterward by Venus. And that happens in between the star Spica, the first fruits, and the branch of the Lord, and above the star Arcturus, pointing forward to the sons of light being revealed. So that is the portion of the beautiful promise. And what that star Arcturus means, it points forward to the Lord coming and his sons and daughters being revealed. So the setting of the stage of tabernacles, where we can find references to tabernacles in the scriptures other than the events description in the book of John, and it pointing forward to the Lord coming out of his temporary dwelling, being revealed, but also his beloved dressed in his splendor, Venus, currently still a morning star, in the hidden in the rays of the sun. She is about to conjoin with the sun a couple of days later, and then she will rise as an evening star. So the beloved is going through a transitioning period right now. And here you can read what that means prophetically. And then the more serious part of this article, the Hoshana Rabbah fire offering by the priests, referring to a vertical offering unto the Lord of first fruits. That is the beautiful part, but there's also an embedded meaning found in the book of Zechariah, Zechariah 5, that the fire offering has references to nuclear warfare. So we have talked about the scriptural descriptions of coming nuclear warfare. We have seen the enemy hinting toward that, also tied to Zechariah 5. And now I've researched this information in more detail, and have found the what I believe to be evidence that the fire offering connected to Hoshana Rabbah also has a connection to Zechariah 5 and nuclear warfare. So the information is partly derived from this booklet, and there is a larger document about nuclear warfare in the end times where we can find that in the scriptures. That is, you're able to download that over here. The description pointing to the ephod, actually the payload encased in lead, and the visual representation of wickedness in a basket, tied to the spirit of harlotry of Babylon. And we know that the daughter of Babylon is about to receive that judgment. So on the calendar, the woman caught in adultery was brought before the Lord on Shemini Atzeret. At that time, grace was extended to her, and the Spirit convicted the bystanders and caused the people who were in condemnation to depart. But the Lord, who is the only one eligible to throw the first stone, of course, he is going to be authorizing ultimately the onset of judgment. So there is a marker on the calendar, the coming week, where we, I believe, should be mindful of that. So here you can find additional information of the backing of the scriptures in Zechariah 5, pointing forward to nuclear warfare. But to repeat that, the article is marked over here, and the larger document, if you'd like to deepen that out, you can find that over here. And then, if you haven't picked it up from the community post already, the end being declared from the beginning. So on Simchat Torah, the transition is made to close the Torah readings for the year. Those are the Torah readings that Ezra marked on each Sabbath. It's called the Parashat readings. And on Simchat Torah, after the final readings are done, the transition is made to Genesis 1:1. And in Genesis 1:1, especially in the first word, Bereshit, the end is declared from the beginning, because in the meaning of the word pictures in Hebrew, we can actually read that the Prince of Glory is going to come out of his tent, out of his place, to start something new. So it has in itself both a picture of rescue, but also of judgment. So as we transition from Hoshana Rabbah into Simchat Torah, there is a double picture of intimacy with the Lord and the Prince of Glory coming out of his tent. So that can be found in the video below, but here you can see that indeed on Simchat Torah, Genesis 1 is read, just like in the next Sabbath on the calendars which tend to the weekly Sabbath. So in a nutshell, a couple of pictures from that video, the word Bereshit with the pictorial Hebrew letters embedding the Prince of Glory coming out of his home, out of his bait, out of his tent, and doing a new creation. Something amazing is going to unfold, and it is about the tasks at hand, marking the end of one age and the beginning of something new. It has to do with the revelation of the cross and the Lord coming out of his place, not as a lamb, but as a lion. So here you can find the video. I included the video for you to uncover the meaning of the word Bereshit. The author has a particular vision about a time frame of the Lord's birth and a time frame of his coming. My understanding of when he was born differs a little bit. I hold to September 11, 3 BC. So that is for you to glean. That is not the intent why I included this video, and it's not necessarily what I agree with. So this is to glean. And then in the endnotes, I included my second new article. And I'm going to take a quick look with you at that article. It's entitled Be Ye Ready. It's about our spiritual preparedness, of course, first and foremost. I've shared that many times, that is the priority, that we are called by the Lord to both be spiritually watchful and vigilant, readying ourselves to stand before Him. And that is something we are going to have to balance with His other instruction to occupy until He comes and be a support to the people in your care, the people you're connected with. And we have the ability to also be a blessing to them. And what I usually don't focus on too heavily is that there is also an opportunity, and if the Lord lays it on your heart, maybe even an urgency to consider your practical and medical preparation. And this is what that article caters to. So I have an independent article about spiritual readiness and providing information for people who find themselves left behind after the rapture. So on this website, you're going to find a ton of articles about the end times, topics like what happens to children in the rapture, what is the beast system going to be like, an opportunity to inform people from different religious backgrounds like Jehovah's Witnesses, Catholics, Muslims, information which is catered to their set of beliefs, but also practical things like a format for a letter to write for the people left behind. So you are sure that you cover all the bases. So that is found in the article over here. The rest of this article focuses on emergency preparedness. And this is a topic I usually don't give a lot of attention to. I believe most people have prepared themselves to a certain extent, but having this list on hand gives you an opportunity to first quick check the provisions you have made. Perhaps there are some considerations that you haven't thought of or reminders otherwise, but it's also a way of informing and empowering others to do likewise. So, of course, the first priority items, the shelter, the clean water and food, and then a large amount of considerations and practical things to do, but maybe also to consider, to purchase. And of course, examples of shelf-stable food items and things you can easily buy, and the supermarket is readily available. And I've also tried to make sure that it is not very costly. So you can actually do preparations regardless of your budget. So even if you have a very small budget, you can simply start very, very small. That's what I have done as well. I have a small amount of preps, as complete as possible, fitting to my budget and the needs of me and my children. Something to consider while prepping, and that has to do with mindset and insight, knowledge and skills you may or may not be aware of, and also to be mindful to not go overboard or to start prepping from a perspective of fear. So it's really nice and calming to watch this particular video. It's a lovely Christian lady who has her own channel. It's called Prep Steading, and I love her calm approach to things, and she is able to put all her preparation in a biblical context of first and foremost seeking the Lord, trusting the Lord, but then also being wise and prudent with what you have on hand or access to, and not just be able to provide for yourself and your loved ones, but also be a blessing to others. In addition, there's a booklet entitled Disaster Crash Course. It is a brief booklet of how to provide for your family and be resourceful with everything you have in and around the house. It is designed by informed Christians. It's a short download, so this is a good way to consider, have I thought about what do I do when there is no running water or electricity? How do I keep my food cool? How do I actually do my laundry without a laundromat or without all the machinery we're so used to having functioning in the house? So it's a very hands-on practical approach. Then all kinds of free downloads and printables. And if you decide to download information on offline carriers, be mindful that in a situation where there is instability or maybe even a disaster or chaos, that the utilities we have, but also the internet, may not be functioning or as stable as we're used to. So a general piece of advice that I have been given, which I'm also handing out to you, is that it's wise to have the information on paper. And if you decide to download it on an electronic device, make sure that it's able to run off-grid. So either have enough batteries on hand or for instance, a solar charger for your handheld or for your phone. So that is something to really be mindful of. So here are all kinds of downloads and printables which are for free in more exceptional situations, and apps also to put on your phone. There are really solid apps that can really help you in an off-grid situation where you have all kinds of questions about the situation you are in at that moment. Saving and sharing information. What to think of when the grid goes down. And the reality that a lot of Christian information is already being censored, scrubbed even by a lot of platforms. So especially if you are preparing toward people who find themselves left behind after the rapture, make sure you print it on paper and be sure that it is for them accessible without the grid, because otherwise they're not going to have access to that information. And then the discernment, I think that is the most important topic. Use discernment with regard to what kind of information you trust and share, and especially whose instructions you're going to follow. Because of the COVID-19 crisis, the induced crisis, we have also learned a lot of lessons, namely established leaders, regardless of where they come from, government, experts, even church leaders, can both knowingly and unknowingly, incompletely or incorrectly inform, even misinform and mislead. And if we are following people who are either uninformed, fearful, blind guides, and it gets worse, wolves in sheep's clothing, or even Judas goats, that can result in a lot of unnecessary damage, pain, loss, and even ultimately our demise. So the Lord instructs us to follow no man or woman, but to trust Him and Him alone. Test everything against the Word of God. Trust the guidance of the Holy Spirit in your decision making. And we have been given that opportunity that by the Spirit, He will guide us in all truth. And especially where you are providing information for other people you support to be spiritually ready or otherwise prepared, make sure that you encourage them to do their own research, to verify the information which is offered to them. And if you are looking toward preparing people who are going to come after us, like a left behind booklet or a letter or a folder you have on hand, make sure to include that we know from the scripture that after our departure, the world will be filled with lies, with deception, with a lot of error, not just from government agencies, national and international, but also within established churches, because those who find themselves left behind have not fully obeyed the Lord or have otherwise compromised spiritually, including church leaders. So people may flock to church buildings and find other believers or even people who have had like leadership positions. But it's very important that people go by the word and the spirit first and foremost, and do their own research and have a very high level of discernment. So if you haven't done so yet, you can find a letter format to write your own left behind letter over here. If it's difficult to find words, or you would just like some examples written in the right tone, that is sometimes really difficult to not just find the right words and consider all the topics, but also the right tone. You can find some samples over here, including a letter for people who are very hard to reach. So this is the quick overview of the 2 articles. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to take the time to speak out the first article as a whole. So I pray the Lord's peace and His blessings over your evening, and thank you for watching. Much love.